What's up? Welcome back. It is top five, and since I just did a 40 for 40 of The Dark Knight, I am doing a top five for Christopher Nolan. This first one that I've tried to tackle that's directors. When I do a top five for actors, I haven't been doing by film. I've been doing it by performance, like which performance worked the best, who gave the best, like what's their best performance, what's their most memorable performance, whatever, that kind of combination. With Nolan, then the translation would be what was the best directed film. That's really hard to say. I don't know what this list is, but this is top five Christopher Nolan in some regard. This isn't just my personal. I love Chris Nolan. Actually, there's a single film of his that I would say, if I was a Rotten Tomato critic, none of his films for me would be rotten. Um, there's that weird 60 to 70% where they're fresh, but they're not certified fresh. And like for me, that's where like Following and Tenet go, where I'm like, I think there's merit in watching them, but I don't think there's merit in, like, I don't think they're gonna be here for all of eternity. You know what I'm saying? They're not gonna be at the end of Nolan's career. We're not gonna talk about them like, oh my god, you know, when he has the list of films that Spielberg has to his name. I think those are like the BFG, and I don't know, just, you know, I'm trying to think of another random Spielberg, 1941 or something. I don't know. It's just another. I probably just really slided those films, but um, yeah, I think Following was an interesting sort of proof of concept for who Chris Nolan could be as a director, which led him to Memento, which was the film that really kickstarted everything for him. Following got him a budget for Memento and a star. Whereas I think Tenet is just an example of excess and how studios don't like to say no to Chris Nolan. And they're like, it's weird, and his fans seem to like this kind of stuff. They liked Inception and Interstellar, so why not? This is totally up there. You know, sometimes he does need a little bit of feedback. He does need. Watching Tenet was like I felt like I was having a conversation with Chris Nolan while he was dropping acid, and he was trying to explain to me the plot of, I don't know, The Lord of the Rings, but he had never read The Lord of the Rings or something, and he was just talking. I was like, Chris, slow down. Chris, no, you're not making any sense. You're just, I don't know, you just keep talking about elves. I don't know, what about elves? What are you talking about? You know, just, I feel like Tenet it's a great idea. It's a great concept, and he does a lot of things that are cool with it. It's kind of incoherent, just a little bit. You shouldn't have to watch a film 5 times. You know what I'm saying? To be like, I think I now kind of understand it. I think it's finally there. So the rest of the films, it's like trying to choose between your children. I love all of his films. Like I said, they'd all be positive, but then above that, I love all of his films. I don't know how to do a top 5 for Nolan. So I'm counting out Interstellar simply because it's the only other film of his that I've only seen once. I know that's weird, but I feel like I can't necessarily prop up a film where I'm like, yeah, this is top 5 for me when all these films feel top 5 for me. So that's why Interstellar isn't in my top 5. It's not because I don't believe it's a directorial achievement for Nolan. It's just from my perspective, some of these films I've watched like 5, 10 times, you know, at least. So, the impossibility of doing this list is ridiculous. And I don't fully comprehend what this is about to be, but let's tread lightly into my top 5 Christopher Nolan films. I'm so scared. Number 5, The Prestige. I still think this is a great film. I think it's a great cast. I think it's a great misdirection. I think there's enough there. On a rewatch, it's really fun. This film is actually really fun on the second time through, because then you get to kind of watch and see all the little things that Chris Nolan was throwing at you. But the first time through, I was kind of like, wait, what? Because it's like you might know parts of the twist, but I don't think you know all of the twist. So if you've never seen The Prestige, I think he managed to direct a really well done film. And it's kind of a film that has its own thing. Like, there really aren't other films like it. It doesn't even really feel like the other Chris Nolan films. You know, he did this, like, in between Batman films. It's just, I think it's a really solid Nolan piece. And yeah, I think it's deeply underrated. I know it didn't quite light up the awards circuit like it should have. I feel like this is kind of like how with Denis Villeneuve, Prisoners is excellent. Prisoners just didn't go anywhere the awards season, but if you watch Prisoners, it's really hard to not watch that and go, this is an excellent film. And that's how I feel about The Prestige. I'm just like, this is an excellent film. It just is. So I've got The Prestige in at number 5. With a bullet. Number 4 on my list, God help me, is, I'm going with Dunkirk. It's Nolan's version of a war film. It's what he would do and how he would shoot a war film. It's, we don't really get a lot of that from him. I like that Nolan figures out a way to challenge himself in a way where you see his style, but you see it imported into genres that we've seen 1,000 times before. See, it's kind of the difference between Nolan and Wes Anderson, is that Wes Anderson kind of seems to direct films. He writes films to his strength and directs films to his strength that are all kind of about this melancholy world, and they're all quirky, and but they're not really, like, different. Nolan is actually trying to shift into different genres, whether or not he's doing like a space drama like Interstellar, whether or not he's trying to tackle time travel with Tenet, or just do a straight up war film like Dunkirk. He's actually trying to take his tools of the trade and actually put them into other films and show how his style works in another film. I think the great unknown, the great great white whale for Nolan would be, can he do it with a comedy? That's what I want to know. Is, can Chris Nolan direct a comedy? Because if he could somehow figure out how to make a film that's funny and also embraces his style, I think that would be the ultimate achievement for Nolan, is if he can break out of the serious, because all of his films are serious. If he could break away from that, I think that's golden for him. I think done. Number 3 on my list is Inception, which I love this film, and I've seen this definitely 5 times. This is a high contender for the very top of my list. And I just, it kind of blows me away, even the silliness of it. Even when people point out something and they're like, that's silly, I'm like, but I still kind of love it. You know, like, I still kind of love the fact that I don't know, like, what were we supposed to get with the top? The top starts to wobble at the end. You know what I'm saying? Like, but he did that purposefully for a reason. And it's funny because Nolan is so intentional on his choices. I think that Inception is such a fantastic movie with such a fantastic cast. It's just a great film. I love it, and he has a lot of really amazing shots here, and just how he made this film how he came up with this film, everything. I mean, this film has been used as a pop culture reference. I've seen people talk about Inception as like a, like, oh, is this are we being Inception? Like they use it in pop culture references because of this film. It's definitely planted itself in the history of cinema. So Inception is number 3. Number 2 for me is the reason I'm doing this list, and this is really hard for me. 2 and 1 are really hard for me, but number 2 is The Dark Knight. It might actually be my personal favorite of Nolan's, and there's a lot about this that I love. It's the film. It's one of those films that 30, 40 years from now we will still be talking about, and people will still be salty that it was not nominated for Best Picture. I'm just gonna say that it transcends the fanboy. It's just as good as Michael Mann's Heat. It's just as good as any other crime thriller in that subgenre. It plots itself perfectly. It's got compelling characters. It has a narrative unlike the other Batman films. It's just stunning. I mean, it's so well written. The actors, the performances were so great. Everything about this film is it's so well shot. The cinematography was great. Everything about The Dark Knight just worked for me. Everything about it, on every level. And it's my number 2. So, honorable mentions. I guess I would give shout outs here to the other Batman films. I only picked one. I didn't want this list to just become full of Batman, but yeah, I do understand that we wouldn't have had The Dark Knight without Batman Begins, but Batman Begins is one of those examples of sometimes you start something and it's really good, but we don't know how good it can be until we see the sequel. There are a lot of people, for example, that believe Godfather Part 2 is better than The Godfather. However, I think those two are both really close. I think the best comparison is X-Men to X2. I know that's comparing superhero films, which is not necessarily helping my case about The Dark Knight transcending the superhero genre. But it's like Bryan Singer's X-Men was good. It hit, and we were all excited about it, and everybody was like, oh, this is a great film. But then X2 came around, and it was like Bryan Singer really took full advantage of the fact that he had already introduced us to this world and these characters, and he actually built a better story and more compelling characters with better narratives. So that's what Nolan does with The Dark Knight, is he takes the fact that he's already established this world and these characters, and he doesn't have to do that again. He doesn't have to introduce you to Lucius Fox. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have to introduce you to Rachel. He just immediately puts these characters into a scenario, and he uses the most iconic Batman villain, and everything happened perfectly. The cards, as they were laid out, exactly perfectly well, but we wouldn't have been here if Batman Begins sucked. So you have to at least give it a nod. And then also The Dark Knight Rises. I actually like this. I like that it leaves it like there's so much ambiguity in the ending about what could happen with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, about seeing, Bale and Hathaway at the end of the film. I actually thought I liked Tom Hardy as Bane. I think it's really hard for anybody to follow up against, what Heath Ledger did as the Joker, and actually what Aaron Eckhart did as Harvey Dent. But I think Tom Hardy came in and he made Bane his own thing, which is what Heath Ledger did with the Joker, is that he just, he embraced the whole thing. But there is a little bit more of it's a hard act to follow. It's, for me, I would compare it to sort of the Toy Story franchise. It's like Toy Story 2 is my favorite because I think Toy Story 2 built on what Toy Story 1 did, but Toy Story 3 just kind of closed it out really well. It's sort of like with Dark Knight Rises, I think he just landed the plane. I think he just wrote a film that closed out his trilogy really well, but I don't think there was an exponential growth between 1 and 2. I think 2 is actually the peak of the franchise, but Tom Hardy's Bane is it's a beast of a performance. I wish he had been recognized for And yeah, I'll say it. I think he should have been recognized for playing Bane. I think what he did, considering the last time we saw Bane, he was just like this mindless idiot that stood next to Uma Thurman for an entire film. Yeah, yeah, we made a huge improvement with Bane. So, and so those are my honorable mentions. I guess I mean, I could honorable mention Interstellar and Insomnia. I already talked about Interstellar and why it's not on the list because I've only seen it once. Um, Insomnia for me, it's like, it is an adaptation, which is what makes it a little bit unique, is that there was a film before this. It's not, I mean, obviously the Batman films are adaptations, but there was an actual film. Insomnia was a film that was done in another language, and Chris Nolan came in and just made an English adaptation for it. So sometimes when there's like a previous product, it just becomes a little less impressive. Like, I'm not, at the end of Matt Reeves' career, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, Let Me In is the best thing that he did. You know, it's just, he's going to move on. He's going to make better films. You know, it's like, yes, okay, but Let the Right One In was great and was fine. You just made a great adaptation of it. Insomnia has some fantastic performances, though, worth mentioning. Al Pacino and Robin Williams are fantastic. Robin Williams is fantastic in that film. So, my number one is Memento, of course. There would be no Nolan without Memento. I had the opportunity to see this film. I used to live in a small town, and Memento never came. It never came to my town. But I actually happened to be on vacation outside of my town in a bigger city, in a major area that actually had Memento. And I was like, oh, I heard so much about this film, I really have to see it. So I actually had the opportunity to see it theatrically, and I didn't know who Chris Nolan was. Wasn't really a big Guy Pearce fan. You know what I'm saying? Like, he really hadn't popped for me. I was like, oh, it's the girl from Matrix. You know, I mean, like, so many things in this film. It's just like, yeah, okay, I kind of know these people. Like, there wasn't really, it felt very indie. But then it kind of blows your mind. Especially the age that I was at the time. I was just getting out of high school. You know what I'm saying? I was just about to graduate. And Memento hit. And it's one of those films where I feel like that is one of those like life-affirming moments for me as to why I love film and why I'm still sitting here. Even though I've lost my vision, even though I'm blind as shit, I went and got a film degree. I went and got all of this, and Memento is one of those films for me. Memento is just a film that gave me that reason as to why we're so attracted to this medium as an art form. That somebody like Chris Nolan could come in sort of out of nowhere with this great concept, and put together. He didn't even get. These are not heavy hitter actors. I mean, not to slight Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Joe Pantoliano, but they're not. They're not heavy hitter actors. And he turned them into them. You know, the film turns them into them. They all give sort of their career best performances here in this film. And I fully believe if Memento had been terrible, we would not know who Chris Nolan was today. Sometimes there are those proof of concept films and they don't work out for people, and then those people don't get the jobs. And, you know, we never hear from them, where they end up directing TV episodes or something. You know, they go to TV and you still don't hear from them because you don't always know who's directing TV episodes. So, but luckily this was a huge hit and it changed his life forever. It wasn't Following that changed his life forever. Following, I think, got him to Memento. It got him enough money to be able to make Memento on a low budget. But Memento is the film that still to this day everybody looks back on, and it's like, it hasn't changed. It stood the test of time. It's a classic, and it is the birth of Christopher Nolan. So, of course, this is my number one. Sorry, I love The Dark Knight, but I also love Memento. I think both of them are in my top 10. So, anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I'll be back with another top 5 later. Until then, I'll see you guys on the other side.